Cool. All right, everybody. So obviously this is going to be another fun-filled guild meeting. But first, a word from our sponsors. I guess that's not quite going to work when I'm doing full screen, right? So last night I was playing with some things that I've been looking into and talking to some friends who are developers at the wonderful MITRE organization about an open source project they're doing, and it has to do with the future of SCAP. We'll talk about why that is, but I joked about being full metal CISO, and where we try to teach chief information officers and chief security officers to engineer like us and not live in Word files. So you probably are an engineer, you don't care about being a CISO and thinking like them. I think we probably in our day jobs as engineers on the front line agree that governance of large cloud systems is complicated and risk governance doubly so, and takes a lot of time and energy. There's some kind of continuum between what CISOs handle, which is the vision, the strategy, and the philosophy, and what we have to do, which is implementation tasks and detail. And I talk about the information security program sandwich because the thing a la South Park, where there's a bunch of question marks for the third step to profit, much like in our line of work, there's some in between where the strategy, the high level goals, and like how those drive down into how we actually encrypt things at rest, build a secure architecture, envision and realize a zero trust world. This middle ground is usually where things get complicated because the strategies are usually not at the level of detail we need, and we need someone or something to tell us what level of detail is right, and the details are actually done the right way. So the OG way, there are some people here who actually work on some of these things, is a series of standards around information security practice and governance. They are a whole collection of data standards that evolved out of them, but much like people are probably not surprised, prior to their existence, people were doing the risk management framework. It was all kinds of fun. And those begot other things that are more specific or detail oriented than these high level visions and strategies of the risk management programs that we're asked to fulfill. And there's some middle gap, but we usually struggle through this. But there are things that I think in the civilian customers we have, they don't talk about a lot, which are SRGs and STIGs. I think we talk about STIGs sometimes, and sometimes they're applied. Most of the time, we don't have to worry about dealing with them. We have someone like configure them in Nessus for us, and we see our servers like either match the requirements or they don't. When the chief information security officer of an agency should be thinking about these kinds of things, they live in a Word and Excel and a PDF world, and them understanding how those things map up to their reality is difficult, and they don't really communicate in a data-focused, small incremental change way with the kind of tools that engineers use. But those tools eventually evolved and existed, and I call them the OG old school tools, but SCAP is very much still a thing. SCAP is a collection of formats and a different data standards that represent how you handle systems. And ironically, the only real official tools that are officially provided by the government or the US military are Java desktop applications. So SCAP is short for the Security Content Automation Protocol. Most people use STIG, incidentally, whether they know it or not, by using XCCDF, which are checklists that tell you what kinds of things you need to do. CPEs are taxonomies that tell you the kind of tools that you're operating with, server, operating system, software packages, and give them unique enough identifiers so that when we talk about potentially vulnerabilities, CVEs, and their impacts with CVSS, we can kind of build a world, like a graph database if you want it. Now, is that database existing? Kind of yes, kind of no, but that's all underlying all that are XML data standards. Some people have been subjected to using this, but a lot of times I think we even avoid them. And definitely the people that should be taking these requirements and contextualizing them to our different government agency deployments, they usually don't have to look at this level of detail because it sucks. So as GIF is the peanut butter, STIG viewer is to STIG checklist and XCDDF. It's made by DISA, an arm of the US military. It is a resource-heavy Java Swing GUI application. It is not great for collaboration. It's tried and true and it's old school, and I've had to use this at different times of my life. So if I were to share my screen, you might be familiar with this. If some of you aren't, forgive me, but this is like the only really official tool that exists for people to use, where you would like, even in the modern, you might be surprised that if you want to base a Kubernetes deployment from scratch, even if like you might actually have one, but the problem is you like are in the cloud and you might not even use EKS or a managed Kubernetes offering from AWS, the STIG presupposes that you have full control to all the controller components and all the pieces of Kubernetes, and you'd have to go through this and fill this out manually and turn this into a checklist. And then you would put in all these answers. But realistically, most agencies don't go and filter these. Like, we all work in a modern cloud world. We might not have 60% of these apply because we control very finite things through AWS or Google or Azure that we can actually modify. Like, we wouldn't want to run the Kubernetes cluster by yourself. So like 60% of this might not apply. Do organizations tailor these requirements? Usually not. So you might ask, well, I talked about the Word and Excel heavy world of the CISO suite and the C-suite overall. So are there better solutions to this problem? And can we make it so that you can have collaborative analysis of the checklist requirements and actually go through them in a more effective way? Fortunately for you, I found out there is some next generation stuff for MITRE called Vulcan that they've been working on, which I thought was pretty cool. I played with it last night. It's written in Ruby and is designed such that you could have a web application where people can authenticate through different ways. It can support LDAP and other things for our environments if you have to have more than one person in it, and you can have collaborative review of not just the requirements, but in the future, how you actually work through the checklist for an organization. So let's say that you have such a STIG or SRG. I won't get into the difference between them because I probably will screw it up. But if you were to like need to upload this, you could do things like this, and you can have more than one. Now, there are lots for Linux, and there are some for even cloud services. I'm not sure how many people have actually played with these before. In the future, you'll be able to use tools like this. You can select which STIG you want to use, and then you would make a project, and then you would use a STIG identifier to say, you know, what project you have and identify the findings when you find them. And then this is going to churn along very quickly. And then you can do things like customize your baseline, and you could add controls, you can remove controls, you can say like why they're not applicable. And then you can share this with other people. And if you're someone in the C-suite, you can even tell them because I said so. And then people will have an auditable history of who said what, and people can actually choose, if they're not the CISO, whether to request or a change or deny or approve, or my broken keyboard, this I do what I'm told. And then you can have a fun, more collaborative worldview that's not based in a desktop application that only one of you can use. So that's a future thing. I think it's in flight, and I don't think it's completely done, but I was playing with it last night, and this is very interesting because it means that we can kind of align the strategy and take the guides and actually present them to C-suite level people, let them review the changes you need for the checklist, also help them in using that to review individual systems moving forward and have a more collaborative, friendly environment that I think us engineers like, because that's the way we as engineers behave. So that was my quick lightning talk. I hope that was interesting. I don't know if anyone has questions.
Hi, AJ. Is it STIG only right now in terms of what it can, the prototypical documents that then get turned into
Yes.
the specialized ones?
For Inside Baseball, so yes, Gary, it supports only XCCDF checklists, and the intent is that the people in MITRE develop a Ruby domain-specific language called InSpec, or at least they use it alongside other people. Most of our fellow engineers in these meetings use it, and it's part of something called the Security Automation Framework that MITRE is involved in pushing in Department of Homeland Security, Health and Human Services, and CMS. They actually have tooling that will take these checklists and stub out, or actually using other OVAL sources. If you look at what I was talking about, the difference between XCCDF and OVAL, they build tools that will take this data and then stub it out and write the InSpec tests such that you could generate with your leadership the actual checks, because that's just the check. And then the automated data that you need would be there. I know I answered that very quickly, and Gary probably understands it, but if people need to be more clear, I can try to explain further, but I hope that helped.
I'll point out that while STIGs appear in XCCDF, unless you're part of the military, I think you get just the XCCDF, you don't get the companion OVAL.
You do not, exactly.
Yeah. And the XCCDF is a bit strange. It's not true XCCDF. It has extra STIGgy stuff in it. But there is also something I'll mention. It's the National Checklist Program. It's on the nvd.nis.gov website. And there are many XCCDF checklists there that may or may not work well with this tool, but it's probably worth checking that out.
Absolutely. That's actually where I got some of the checklists from, and I can drop a link in the chat and in the guild channel afterwards. But that's it for me. Unless other people have questions, going once, going twice.
I liked it.
Cool. I appreciate the feedback, but like obviously not a question, but yeah, I like it too. The thing is, a lot of these formats are old and have a lot of history. So a lot of people are building modern tooling around it. So I thought it was fun to see someone actually trying, because that will make it easy to communicate what the requirements of a system are for people. And I only point out the Kubernetes one, not because I think you should use Kubernetes, but people actually write STIGs for like AWS system baselining and Azure baselines for cloud accounts. The Center for Internet Security makes them for a whole variety of things. So like, it's not like everyone's favorite technology, but it's definitely very much in use. It's just a lot of the old crusty tooling people don't use, and they just try to avoid it. So it's hard to interact with the rest of the world who sets the standards. So
I'm also wondering whether the appearance of InSpec as an implementation language for inspection of a target of evaluation is an alternative to OVAL. That implies that if some of the people at MITRE hadn't assassinated the authors of OVAL, they've at least suppressed them enough to allow other opportunities.
yeah, I actually don't know much about that. I've asked people and I don't have much of an insight into how that's going on. So cool.